Welcome back to the Manage to Win podcast. I'm your host, David Russell. Today's episode is sponsored by Dave's Charm School, and that's all about relationships, soft skills, behaviors, habits, those types of things. You want to have great working relationships with people because you want them to be their best. They love what they do what they love, and everybody's getting along. It's a little, Shangri-La there. So, however, if there's problems, you have legal problems, compliance, that's what our podcast is about. But anyway, Dave's Charm School, 30 days free. Check it out. Have everybody get along, behave better, be their best, have more fun. Today's episode, though, interviews Alex Medina and Brandon McKelvey of California Compliance Solutions. Basically, it's two lawyers who have created an online accountability and training system so that you don't need lawyers. That doesn't make sense. Well, you need to hear what these guys have to say. Let's dive in. Welcome, Alex and Brandon, to the conversation. I'm really glad to talk with you. Before we get started, will you please let the audience know a little bit about your background, what you're doing today, and then we're going to wow them with something they normally don't hear from lawyers. And I'm here with two lawyers, but I'm comfortable. You guys are cool.
We're not charging you, don't worry. Yeah, so I'm Alex Medina, and I am the co-owner of a law firm. We represent employers in the state of California. It's called Medina McKelvey. My background is I've always wanted to be a lawyer, and then I practiced law for a lot of years and realized I don't really like being a lawyer. I want to be a business owner. I want to be an entrepreneur. So I got into a line of business with this guy here where we get to represent business owners and employers throughout the state of California.
Okay.
Yeah, my name is Brandon McKelvey. I'm the other half of Medina McKelvey, the law firm, and I've been practicing for 20 years. And I've had a variety of different experiences practicing. I used to be on what most of us would refer to as the dark side, and I was a plaintiff's lawyer for a time, and I used to sue businesses. And then I realized that the better approach was really defending businesses. So for the last 15 years, I've been defending businesses in a variety of contexts. And in addition to our law firm, we have what we're soon going to be talking about, California Compliance Solutions, which is really designed to take the law firm out of the equation when it comes to protecting businesses.
So you've kind of dropped a couple bombs there. I don't know whether the audience picked up on it. But first of all, this thing of you defend businesses against what? Of course, that's the other bomb. You're in California.
Yeah, so as many folks who are listening to this podcast might know, if you've ever spent any time in California or have run a business in California, California probably has more laws and more different and perhaps difficult to navigate laws than anywhere else in the country, if not the world. And so it can be a really tricky and challenging place to do business. And anytime you have a lot of laws, if you mess up on the laws, there are people out there to pounce on you, ready to file a lawsuit, ready to try to get some money. So in the area where there's just so many different laws, there's I think 300 plus ways to violate the California Labor Code. The lawsuits against employers in California are skyrocketing. So our job as lawyers, when we have our lawyer hat on, is to help our clients navigate those lawsuits, get out of them, and help prevent them from ever happening again.
But if I'm a business and I'm operating and I think I'm abiding by the law, what's going to trip me up?
Yeah, and that's really what we specialize in. So if you're a business and you've been around for a while, you've probably seen some type of lawsuit in the past. And a lot of those lawsuits are what we would call a single person lawsuit. So it's one employee who comes forward, maybe they argue that they were harassed or they felt that they were somehow discriminated against. And those lawsuits have been common and have been around for years. But those lawsuits typically are brought by a different class of lawyers than the ones we're dealing with, and it's a different type of case than the one we're dealing with. And usually, if you've had that experience and you face one of those single plaintiff lawsuits, a lot of times it's easy to get rid of them. They go away for nuisance money. It's not a big problem. But the types of lawsuits we deal with are what's called a wage and hour class action lawsuit. Also, there's something called the Private Attorney General's Act, which is known as PAGA, and that's a PAGA lawsuit. And those lawsuits are very different and are a very unique animal in California, and that's really what we focus and specialize on.
So I'll jump in if I could, David. So another difference between our area of specialty, which is the wage and hour lawsuits, is they're not typically covered by insurance. So if a business owner is out there and thinks, oh, I've been through a lawsuit before, an employee sued me, we got an insurance company involved and it got taken care of. I was really not even that much involved in it, didn't have to didn't have to do much, didn't have to produce much, didn't cost me that much money, didn't cost me that much time, and for most business owners, didn't honestly cause me all that much stress because it was taken care of by the insurance company. What we do, the area of law that we're in, is actually the biggest threat to California business owners because these wage and hour lawsuits, they're called wage and hour, because they deal with wages or pay, overtime, and hours, the time working. So timekeeping issues, meal breaks, rest breaks, overtime, that sort of thing. The things that seem like maybe not that big of a deal, but they are actually now $1 million problem for most employers in California. Wow. And they're not covered by insurance, David.
And I saw something the other day where there's some people call them troll lawyers or whatever. They're almost like call centers. I thought they were selling Ginsu knives, but they're like, hey, bring us your, I hate the billboards of attorney, been in an accident. We'll go get somebody. You're the victim. I hate that stuff. And these guys were like, hey, you're an employee and you haven't gotten your meal breaks or whatever. And it was just such a strong sales pitch. And here you got, a business person that's got 30, 50, 500 employees, whatever it might be, thousands. And they're just trying to be good people, run their business, and these people want to come get them. Absolutely. Instead of, hey, can we help you? You made a mistake. Let's straighten this out. Let's work together. It's this whole victim mentality, and you can get something for nothing being put in the legal realm. I mean, it's so troublesome for me. And then you bring up state of California. I mean, aren't businesses innocent until proven guilty?
It's actually not that way. Let me go back to troll lawyers and talk a little bit about that because I think that's an important part of the equation. Understanding who the opponent here is, who is filing these lawsuits. Because again, if you've had the traditional experience of just a small lawsuit in the employment context, you're probably used to a lawyer that's not that sophisticated. But the lawyers that are filing these wage and hour class action and PAGA lawsuits are incredibly sophisticated. They're some of the richest lawyers in California, and they have large teams, they're well-funded, and they have large war chests that they use to bring these actions against employers. And when they do that, a lot of times employers think, well, it's just one employee and they're suing me and it's like meal breaks and they're saying they didn't get paid right. And we treat our employees well and we're not doing anything wrong. And they think that it's not a big deal. But the reality is that one employee in California with one of these lawyers can represent all of your non-exempt hourly employees, all the employees that you pay by the hour in what's called a class or a PAGA action. And so all of a sudden, one lawsuit with one employee becomes this much larger action that has a lot bigger exposure. And these lawyers have become very sophisticated at finding ways to connect with your employees and to sue you. And let me just give you a few examples of those because I think it will help drive the point home. So one of the biggest lawyers out there who does these cases, he actually has a whole department in his law firm devoted to connecting with folks who have been part of some type of organization, some type of business, and finding ways to sue them. And they're doing a lot of really clever things. Like, so for example, this department just goes and goes on LinkedIn and finds resumes, or Indeed, any of these, Monster.com, and finds resumes for people who are looking for a job. And they find that on that job, lo and behold, the last employment that this person had was at ABC Corp. Well, now they're going to send a letter, an email, a social media post through Facebook, some way they're going to connect with that employee under the guise of, hey, we saw you're looking for a job. We noticed that you worked at ABC Corp. And guess what? We're investigating the actions of ABC Corp, and we believe that they haven't paid their employees correctly or provided them with rest breaks, and that you may have a claim. Why don't you reach out to us? And so immediately they make this connection as this advocate for a worker who worked at this former company, and now all of a sudden you've got wage and hour class action on your hands.
And let me add to that, David, another way that the plaintiffs' lawyers, the lawyers that are representing employees, are getting work is they'll advertise, like you said, but they aren't advertising about meal and rest breaks. That's not exciting at all. They're advertising about things like, were you discriminated against? Were you harassed at work? Were you treated unfairly because of your religion? Were you treated unfairly because of COVID in the time of the pandemic? And everybody gets worked up. And have you ever met somebody who's been fired that says, well, yeah, that was my fault? No, it's always somebody else's fault. It's Sue's fault in accounting. It's Bob's fault in shipping and receiving. They'll call a lawyer, feel righteously indignant that they were wrongfully terminated. The problem is it's really hard to prove a wrongful termination case, and they're not usually worth that much, and they're usually covered by insurance. So these employers will do the intake, and they'll say, oh, I'm so sorry this happened to you, Mr. Smith. Hey, by the way, could you show me your pay stub, and could you show me if you got your meal and rest breaks? And then a wage and hour class action is born. Before you know it, what seemed like a misunderstanding or some kind of frivolous wrongful termination suit turns into $1 million wage and hour class action.
And, it's funny, it may not totally apply, but I think I just read this morning or yesterday, somebody was using the example of a recent Uber lawsuit with the drivers versus employees type of thing. It's not wage and hour per se, but it brings up this breakdown where there was a multi-million-dollar settlement and like 50% went to government and like half of the balance went to the lawyers, okay? And each Uber driver got like $1.
Yeah, let's explain how that works, because I think a lot of folks don't understand that, and that's part of the problem. The reason lawyers are making millions off these cases is because they work on a contingency fee model, which means that they will get a percentage of whatever they recover on behalf of this employee and the class or the PAGA group. Now, without getting too much in the weeds here, with a PAGA action, which is a kind of a government-authorized enforcement action, 75% of that money for a PAGA case goes to the state, and it just goes to the general fund. It's just this way for the state to take money and make money. Meanwhile, the lawyers get 30 to 40% of whatever they recover. So think about $1 million lawsuit. They take a class action that involves several hundred employees, and they get $1 million. 30 to 40% of that is going to the lawyers. $300,000 to $400,000 hit, and they haven't done a lot of work to get there. Meanwhile, some large portion, some large portion is going to the state, and then whatever's left over gets divided among 300 or 400 employees. So the checks that the employees get are sometimes $10, $15, $20 a person for this big lawsuit that an employer paid $1 million to settle.
So the state almost profits from it. They actually may not want to stop these lawsuits. But now, what about this recent? Now, I do want to get into this California Compliance Solutions you guys have started, because that's really kind of weird, quite frankly. But I'm curious, recently there was some big ruling, California Supreme Court, on meal breaks. Now, talk to the audience about what that is. And not only, quite frankly, we have a national audience, even international. It's here in California. Do you think that'll spread? So tell us what it is and why businesses need to be aware of it and watch out for it. But also, what does that mean for people in other states elsewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. The law used to spread east to west. So it used to be an East Coast thing, and then it would catch up with the West Coast. In the era of employment law, it really goes west to east. And so we're seeing things that are happening in California spreading into all the Western Pacific states. And now some of them are trickling into places like Illinois, Massachusetts, and places like that. So these are things that if they're not in your state now, California is setting the precedent, and they will be. So we'll talk about the California Supreme Court case, but let me give you a little history on the California Supreme Court over the last 10 years, which is they've issued one decision after another that has been really just terrible for employers in California and has made it really difficult to do business and really difficult to comply with the labor code and the wage orders in California. And this recent decision is just one of several that is like that. The case is called Donahue versus AMNN Services, those AMN Services. And in that case, this was an employer that actually had a lot of really good policies and practices and was trying to do things right and had a whole really sophisticated timekeeping system actually that would track employees' time. They would record their meal periods, and they would actually have a drop-down screen that would pop up asking them if they missed a meal period or if their meal period was short, why it was short, and then they would fill that out. They had a certification on their time card that was confirming that employees had received their meal and rest breaks during this particular pay period. They were doing a lot of good stuff. Despite all that, the Supreme Court found that there were issues with the way that they were handling meal and rest breaks. And there's really two key rulings in the case that employers need to know about. The first was this particular employer was rounding the meal period time. So let's say an employee clocks in for, they go to take their meal period, they usually take it around noon, and the employee clocks in, instead of at noon, they clock in at 12:05 or 12:03 to take their meal period. And then they go and they take the 30-minute meal period and they clock out. The employer was rounding that time up. So what should be a 30-minute meal period got rounded sometimes. What actually was a 25-minute meal period would get rounded to a 30-minute meal period. So that was the rounding that they were doing. The Supreme Court said that is illegal. It violates the law in California, and you can't do that. And rounding in general, rounding time, is a practice that a lot of employers have. Now, some employers don't round meal period times, but they round the start time of the shift or the end time of the shift. That's something that a lot of employers are still doing today. The California Supreme Court is saying you really can't round time anymore, and if you do, it's going to put a target on your back. So that was the first aspect of the ruling that was important for employers. The second thing that happened.
What if I'm just curious now? What if I'm an employee and I'm okay with that? You mentioned that I could put a note in there. Yeah, I'm okay. I just need to get back to work.
Yeah, no, this is great. This is a great point of that permeates all of wage and hour law in California, which is, it's often counterintuitive. The laws are basically requiring things that even the employees don't want. So for example, there's all these cases surrounding meal periods and rest periods. And if you talk to most employees, and we've talked to thousands of them, they really don't care that much about their meal periods or their rest periods. And sometimes they legitimately want to not take those meal periods and rest periods. But every time those cases get into court, the consistent message that's coming, certainly from the plaintiff's lawyers and then somehow being bought into by the courts, is that even though employees don't care about these things, it's important that these things happen. And so employers are getting caught between what do the employees want and what does the law require.
So let's talk a little bit about the second part of the case, and I think this is the part of the case that is going to be changing, I think, a lot of the ways that a lot of business owners do business because of the ways that we expect the plaintiff's lawyers to be using it. So basically what the California Supreme Court said is that in the area of meal breaks, lunch breaks, again, or for those of you who don't know, in California, one of the only states that requires this, every employee who works more than 5 hours is entitled to a 30-minute lunch break. Has to be completely duty-free, no work, uninterrupted within the first 5 hours of work. If you don't take it, it used to be the case where an employer could say, well, it was their choice, or we've got a good handbook, we've got some good policies, we've got some good procedures, we've got pretty good records. It's essentially, it's not that big of a deal. That's kind of where the fight has been over the last few years. The defense lawyers like us, we've been able to push back. We've been able to provide some evidence to try to reduce the exposure. But basically what the California Supreme Court said, and this is a really important point, is that meal breaks should be treated like a health and safety issue. So it's no longer something that, essentially the court is saying, we know better than the employees what's good for them, and we are essentially requiring employees to take them and employers to enforce them. And if they don't, there's the potential for huge, massive liability on the employers.
So, I mean, when I worked for other companies, I would eat my lunch at my desk.
Can't do it anymore.
What about exempt, non-exempt type of employee type of thing?
Yeah, so that's an important clarification. When we talk about wage and hour rules, largely those are rules that apply to your non-exempt employees, the employees who are paid by the hour. When you have an exempt employee who's paid a salary, and if you're doing that correctly, these types of laws don't typically apply. So the meal and rest period rules, for example, wouldn't apply to an exempt employee.
So let me give you an example why that's important. So a lot of employers, and I think one of the reasons why these cases are the fastest growing type of case in California, even before this Donahue case that came down, is that most employers aren't treating it seriously. They're not treating the threat seriously. A wage and hour class action lawsuit is brought on behalf of all hourly employees, all the current employees at a company, all the former employees of a company, all the way back 4 years over time. every single violation that's found, this is what the plaintiff's lawyers are arguing, gets counted up. And there's penalties that stack on top of penalties that stack on top of penalties. And if they find even just one violation, let's say the case goes all the way to trial and the company spends gobs of money on defense fees and they knock out 99% of the case, if they find just one short lunch break, somebody clocks in 29 minutes instead of 30, that violation alone justifies the lawyer who brought the case getting all of his or her attorney's fees. Could be potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars for a $10 meal period violation. So I think that's one of the things for the business owner clients, folks listening to this, to be aware of. It potentially now is $1 million problem. Let me give you one quick story, David, if I could. So we had a client, they did just about everything right. They had a great handbook, they had some training, they had a system in place that tracked everybody's timekeeping records. All the stuff that really, just a few years ago would have put them in the platinum category in terms of employers, in terms of wage and hour issues. They got sued by one of the lawyers who trolled. They had the same situation. It was somebody that was actually a very good employee, even tried to come back after she left the company, was so happy with it, but got contacted, promised a bunch of money, and brought this lawsuit, probably didn't even realize what she was getting involved in. We got the records. We investigated the case. This client had the highest compliance rate of lunch breaks we've ever seen. Over a 4-year period, they had a 99.63% compliance rate, meaning they were just about perfect, almost statistically insignificant to say they had issues. Yet that case, after a pretty hard fight, went to mediation, and it settled for $750,000, 200 employees. And that was a good deal. They were asking for, in that case, well into the $4 and $5 millions.
That's just crazy. So the troll lawyer connects with one person. What's the process from there? And how do the fees and the fines add up?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Sure. So, and this is one of the things that's often misunderstood about these types of cases is often our client, a client comes to us, they've received this case and they're like, it's one person on this pleading, this complaint that sued us. Why are you saying that this involves all of our employees all of a sudden? And the reason for that is that California has a procedure called a class action that allows, and the law in this area has become very plaintiff friendly, and there's a lot of courts that very easily allow a case to be a class action. And what that means is one employee can represent all the other employees on these meal and rest break cases, on wage statement cases, on pay cases, and they don't have to do too much to do that. And a lot of people think, well, I've got good employees, I've got a good relationship with them, so my existing employees, I got 200 or 300 existing employees, they love us. They're not going to want to be involved in this. But get this, that's not how it works. They don't get to choose, really, whether or not to be involved. They're going to automatically be involved unless they specifically write a note at a certain point in the case to the court saying, I don't want to be involved. And we've done hundreds of class actions, and I can tell you that I can count on 2 hands the number of times an employee has written that note and said, I don't want to be involved. Because from the employee's perspective, if there's a case out there and there's potentially some money at stake and they don't have to be involved at all and somebody else is representing them, why not just ride it out and see what happens and see if they can get some money?
And so let's say there's one meal break violation. What's that going to cost me, potentially?
Well, it's interesting you say that because we've made some calculations on that. And I think you have to look at it like this. There's a lot of different penalties that can stack up in California. And then you also have to consider things like, what is it going to cost me to defend that one meal break? And then what am I going to end up paying if it's proved that I didn't defend that meal break correctly? Believe it or not, when a meal break gets missed, and if it's due to the fault of the employer, meaning they didn't provide it, automatically under the labor code in California, you have to pay that employee an extra hour of pay. Like that's automatic. You're in it for that no matter what. In addition to that, through this Private Attorney General's Act, which is the PAGA, there's all these penalties that can get stacked on top of that are related to that. And believe it or not, there's over $300 worth of penalties that can be stacked on top of that 1 hour of pay for one meal period. Then if you factor in the cost you're going to spend to defend that one meal period, which we say is around $50 a meal period, and the cost you're going to pay if it's proved that you didn't provide the meal period, which is another $50, It literally is $500 to $600 per meal period for this type of violation. So one of the things that your listeners should do, it's a kind of an eye-opening exercise, which is just go take a section of your of a pay period and look at the time records for your employees, and just go through and say, are these meal periods a full 30 minutes? Are they recording a full 30 minutes? Are they late? Or are they missed, not recorded at all? And just count it up for a pay period or 2 pay periods, and just count it up and then multiply that number by 500.
And I would say that's not even counting in rest breaks. So rest breaks, for every 8-hour shift or every 4 hours, you get two 10-minute rest breaks, right? You got to pay the premium on that as well. That's much harder to prove that it was the employee's choice not to take the rest break. So think about it from a 2-week period for your listeners who are business owners who have hourly employees in the state of California. If they do an audit, talk to somebody in payroll, do it themselves, pull the time records, pull the pay records. Just over a 2-week period, let's say you got 50 employees, an average violation rate that we typically see is anywhere from 10 to 40%. We have done close to 600 of these wage and hour class actions. Every case is different, but one thing is almost always the same. Every single client says, we're solid. We've got great records. We treat our people well. We've got policies. We've got procedures. You're not going to find anything in our records. We look at the records. We find anywhere from 10 to 40% or higher of violations. The one client I mentioned earlier was the one exception. They still paid almost $1 million because of that. So if you look at that 2-week period, you will find violations. Multiply it times $500 per violation. Extrapolate it out over the course of 4 years. That's why we say meal and rest break compliance is $1 million problem.
But how does the plaintiff lawyer, a third party, get access to that information?
That's a great question, and you can thank the California Supreme Court and many other courts in California for essentially giving them access to this. One of the first things we often confront in a lawsuit like this is the plaintiff sues, we get hired, and the employer says, this is bogus, we should fight it, and don't let them get any information. And for years, remember, I've been doing this for 20 years. For years, we would have those fights. And I've represented very large Fortune 500 companies and had those fights. And back 10 years ago, we used to win some of those fights. We would really fight hard, and we would try to prevent them from getting access to the pay time records and to access to the contact information, the names, addresses, and phone numbers of these employees. Well, just a few years ago, the California Supreme Court came down with a decision in this area that basically declared open season on these cases and said, it's okay for a plaintiff who's filing one of these class action or PAGA cases to go on a fishing expedition. Like, that's what the law entitles them to do. So when you have a case like this, even though there's some arguments we still make and we try to fight, most often it's a guarantee that the plaintiff's lawyer is going to get access to the time records for these employees, and they're going to get the name, address, phone number, and contact information for the employees who are in this class. So imagine if you have 200 employees that work for you at any given time, like currently. Well, you got to remember you have turnover, right? And so there's probably, if you get hit with one of these class action cases that goes back 4 years, you probably have maybe 200, 300, 400 former employees who have no loyalty to
maybe
you
1,000, depending on the industry. I mean, hey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
None of those employees have any loyalty to you whatsoever. And all of a sudden, they're going to start to get regular letters and communications from this plaintiff's lawyer saying, we received your information in the course of a lawsuit. We're investigating this claim. We believe that you were underpaid. Contact us. As soon as that happens, you're in trouble regardless of whether you have a problem with your compliance or not.
So I would think by the way, before I go on, I don't get, and we could do a whole show on this, and I don't want to, but I don't understand. These California Supreme Court justices and a lot of these other judges, have they never had a business? Have they never had a real job? I mean, what is with them? I mean, why do they want to? I mean, if we don't pay taxes, we don't have businesses, they don't have a job. Don't they get that?
I'm not going to go so far as to say that. I think most of the justices, you don't get to be on the California Supreme Court or any Supreme Court unless you're really, really smart. I think what it is, though, is that, it's California is California. You can take that for what it's worth, but the culture in California has typically been to make sure that the disadvantaged, the underprivileged, et cetera, are taken care of. And so the current makeup of the Supreme Court tends to go towards the belief system that we're here to protect employees. And again, to go back to what I said earlier, the idea is that this is not a pay issue, it's a health and safety issue. Maybe you can take it all the way back to the factory days of, child labor and when people were working 15-hour days, but the California Supreme Court almost feels like it has a moral obligation to protect employees, and they believe that meal breaks and rest breaks are akin to working in a factory free of, hazardous materials.
But as the numbers don't add up that way. I mean, I'm sorry, and I realize you guys probably have to be careful here too, but it's like, the employees are happy, and they make it difficult for a happy employee to say, I'm happy. And they open the door. So you're telling me a plaintiff attorney, basically the troll, throws out the hook and, reels one in. And so if I'm understanding you correctly, then they can contact the employer and say, okay, look at this person's records, or do they get access to everybody's records at once?
That's what we're saying.
Everybody.
In most cases.
From day one, if I get one, I get everybody.
They're going to get most of the records eventually in litigation if you go that route.
4 years back.
And that's the challenge. That's where the balance of power shifts in these cases, really to the plaintiffs' lawyers who are filing these cases, because if they can get access to your employees and they can contact them on a regular basis, not only does that give them the tools that they need to really press you in this lawsuit and extort you, essentially, but also gives them access to an unlimited supply of new plaintiffs for other lawsuits. So you don't want to let that happen.
So can I ask and answer my own question, David?
Yeah.
So what do we do about something like this, right? I mean, it's
Well, that's where I want to go next,
Yeah.
is because you guys have done something that I've never heard of before, particularly from lawyers, and forgive me, but Dead Lawyers Jokes is one of my favorite cartoon books that's out there. I don't know whether you've seen it, you probably have, but it was done by a guy named Wiley, a cartoonist. And I'm sorry, I burst out laughing out loud when I read that book. I love you guys, but it's like, okay.
We get it.
Yeah, you get it. So, but the troll lawyers are a different type of thing. That's more what he's talking about in that cartoon book. But you've done something that basically says you want to enable people to, it's not legal advice without lawyers, but talk to me about California Compliance Solutions, because that's a segment of your business. I'm sure it's been profitable, but all of a sudden you're saying, okay, well, we want to kind of box this up and put it on autopilot and help companies at a very low rate, have some protection against these wild and crazy lawsuits so they can do business.
So I'll start and I'll let Brandon finish. But our idea, and I told you this when we first started, is we like to think of ourselves as entrepreneurs who happen to be lawyers. We like to think like business owners. We love to protect business owners. We own a business. We started a business. We know what it takes to put your blood, sweat, and tears, prayers, everything on the line to create something that matters to you. And we know how disheartening and frustrating it is when somebody's trying to take that away from you. We're building, they're trying to tear it down. We have a law firm. Our law firm does very well. We represent businesses throughout the state of California. We're perfectly happy to continue charging our clients by the hour, defending them in these lawsuits, getting them out as quickly as possible. But there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way to help business owners run their businesses and essentially fight back on what's going on. So I'll just say this really quick. I'll let Brandon jump in. But if the California Supreme Court is saying that meal and rest breaks and things like that should be treated like a health and safety issue, then shouldn't we also treat training and compliance like a health and safety issue? So if you think about it in a factory, those of you who work in a factory, have been into a factory, you see it on the wall, it says, 467 days without an incident. Right? Why is that important? Well, if you've got a violation, a health and safety violation, if you violated the law, you could get fined, but it could hurt somebody. Somebody could get maimed. Somebody could get killed. Employers should think of wage and hour issues in the same way. If they don't do this right, their business could literally get killed.
Yeah, and I think what happened is, as lawyers for many years representing hundreds of employers in these cases, we were just finding that, unfortunately, the traditional method of delivering legal services was not providing an ultimate solution to the problem. And let me explain that a little bit more. Traditionally, lawyers, and this is one of the things people hate about lawyers, and it's a legitimate criticism, is that they typically just throw information at you. They just provide you with a bunch of, this is what the law says, and this is what you're supposed to be doing, and these are the rules, and they don't really give you tools or solutions from a practical business standpoint that will help you become compliant. And that's really the traditional model. Just throw information, but not actually provide a tool or a solution.
And charge you a fortune for the information they provide.
Yes.
In 6-minute increments.
So what we've done with California Compliance Solutions is we've really tried to create the solution and the tools for the employers that are compliant. And give them what they need to be compliant in these areas. Things like, making sure they're paying their employees correctly, making sure they're providing the meal periods, the rest periods, making sure that their wage statements are accurate. We took the top 10 to 15 issues that we have seen in hundreds of these lawsuits over the years, and we basically boxed them up into a complete compliance package. So going back to the analogy that Alex made earlier, which is safety, and it's important that you really do view it this way, because a safety violation in your warehouse or at your business might cost you, if it's really bad, a few $100,000, right? Meal or rest period problem, these cases sometimes settle in the 8 figures. People are paying $10, $15 million to settle these cases. So actually, even though we believe that human safety is more important because humans are involved, the business realities in California of running a business is that meal and rest periods are actually more important than safety. Don't get me started on how backwards that is. But that's the reality. So what do you do for your safety training? What do most employers do for the safety training? So let's take a forklift driver. What do? You know that he's working a dangerous piece of equipment on your property, and that you are going to have to make sure he's trained, that he's certified, and that you've documented that training, so that in the event that he veers off course, God forbid, hits somebody or causes some damage to the property, you'll be able to have the protection you need to go back and say, like, look, we did everything we could to prevent this from occurring. We trained him, we certified him, we checked in, we made sure if he made any mistakes, so if he started driving bad, we took him off the forklift, we disciplined him. You need to have some type of a system like that. Well, we take the same approach that employers are taking with safety, and we just bring it into the wage and hour context. So what are we going to do? We're going to train your managers on wage and hour compliance and show them what it means to how to manage their employees in this area. We're going to train the employees, and we're going to empower them to know the rules and to follow the rules, so that if they don't follow the rules, the managers can enforce the rules. We're going to actually certify them in wage and hour compliance, so that you have that record, you have that documentation you need.
How do you certify them?
And this is important, because a lot of employers out there, they'll train their employees on wage and hour, but that just basically means they'll throw a provision in the handbook, and then maybe on the first day that they've worked there, they'll have somebody talk to them about, hey, you should take your meal periods and rest periods and make sure you clock in correctly. That's not going to do the trick in California. That's not going to keep you from a lawsuit. So what we do is we actually put them through courses, and the courses have an audio component and a visual component. They read the rules, they understand the rules, and then they take a test. And the test has all of the key issues that employees are typically suing employers on, like meal periods, rest periods, expense reimbursement, all of those things. We test them on that. And this is the great thing. It's an open book test, and they have to get 100%. And then that test actually becomes a really valuable piece of evidence. If one of these employees finds a troll lawyer and tries to file one of these cases, you have this training, it's documented, you have a test, you can show that they passed the test, and that they were actually certified in wage and hour compliance. And really the idea here is to stop the lawsuit from happening in the first place. I mean, if a lawsuit, God forbid, happens, it's great to have the evidence, but you really want to root it out from the beginning. And so when the plaintiff's lawyer trolls and finds one of these employees, and they ask for the personnel file, because that's the first thing they do, is they ask for the employee's personnel file, because they're investigating the claim, deciding whether or not they're going to file one of these class actions. They're going to see in this file a full set of training materials, a test, and the fact that this employee was certified in wage and hour compliance.
So what about, I got an employee and they were trained, they were certified, but it's 3 years ago. So then they're like, yeah, I forgot about it, or I don't know what it was, or whatever.
Well, that's actually a really good point, and that's oftentimes the problem with a lot of trainings. A lot of companies will do trainings, they'll even do in-person trainings, and usually those types of in-person trainings are only good for as good as the employee's memory, which is maybe a couple weeks, and then something like that, right? You got to get on to their work, they got to take their lunch break or something, and they'll forget. And so that's one of the reasons why not only do we train, we test, and we certify, but every 3 months we have that employee verify again that he or she has been trained, they're essentially retrained, they verify that they're abiding by the policies, and they're essentially affirming the training that they already did. That quarterly verification goes into their personnel file as well. So for as long as they're at the company, not only will there be the initial certification, Every 3 months, there will be a verification that he or she has been trained and is abiding by the wage and hour.
So here's why the verification process is so important in California. So first, what a verification is going to do is it's going to let you know, the employer know, if there's any issues with an employee not taking their meal periods or rest periods, not getting paid correctly, and you have to ask the question to find out the answer so that you can root these issues out. Because a lot of times these types of things can go undetected. You might think the employee is able to take their meal period. They might think they're taking their rest period, but lo and behold, there's a rogue manager who's kind of not letting them do those things.
Death by assumption is what I call that.
That's right. That's right. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and this is really important, as you can probably tell from a lot of the things we talked about today, California law in this area is a constantly moving target. We just had a new California Supreme Court case that kind of shifted the landscape. There's cases all the time that are coming out from the California appellate courts. There's new laws that come out all the time. And so having a way of connecting with your employees on a regular basis and having the most recent updated law verified with them is really important in this context, and that's what those verifications do.
So you're saying with those verifications, you actually will update the verbiage as needed. So you're constantly reviewing these things so the California Compliance Solutions, calcomply.com type of thing, is always up to date. So it's almost like having your lawyer give you updates. What about the, I know a lot of companies are saying, hey, we've got our policy manual. We got a solid policy, we're good. Maybe they train on it, maybe they don't, but it's like, we got our policy manual, we're good.
Yeah, I'll handle that one, or an employee handbook, right? And they'll even say to us, well, we paid a lot of money, we even hired a law firm to do that. A quick answer to that question is if a handbook was so effective in stopping meal period violations, then they wouldn't be the fastest growing type of lawsuit in California. Period, end of sentence. Here's why. Most handbooks are anywhere from 40 to 100 pages. The important things that people are getting sued on is buried on page like 27 or 28. An employee who, he or she's looking to get started, make some money, they're reading through all this stuff. They've got I-9s, they've got W-4s, they've got onboarding, and they sign it. And then they decide they want to file a lawsuit later. What do they say? I don't remember reading that thing. That thing was way too long. So you have to have a handbook. It's the law. Kind of reminds me of another law we have, seatbelts. You got to wear a seatbelt, right? Seatbelt may save your life, but it's not going to prevent an accident. And that's the same type of thing here. You got to have a handbook, you got to have a policy, but the law does not say you must have a policy. The law says employees have to follow the policy.
Yeah, but you got this whole thing, Donahue versus AMN, whatever. Okay, so they were a super company. They did a ton of things right. So, you've got that end of the spectrum, okay, where you really are doing as much as you can, which I think they were doing it, from what you say, as much as they can. And then you got the business owner who's doing, on the opposite extreme, who's really doing nothing. They may not even have a policy, okay? So obviously I don't want to be with nothing, but to be candid with you, if I'm going to do everything I can and I still get sued, is it worth the trouble? How do I do that cost effectively?
Yeah, I think this is the thing. I think the smart businesses out there are figuring out that this is a serious multi-million-dollar issue, and that if they want to really positively impact their bottom line and not have legal costs dominate a year or two's worth of profits, that the best thing they can do is be as prepared as possible and cut this off from the start. If you have these types of training tools and solutions and certifications and verifications, again, you have a really good chance of preventing the lawsuit from happening in the first place. And then if the lawsuit takes place, you're going to be able to mitigate your exposure substantially with these types of tools versus if you're the small business out there who really doesn't even have the handbook ready, doesn't have any of these tools. We see employers get hammered in those cases. And it really is, when we look at we've handled hundreds of these cases. When you look at some of the businesses, they're paying 10x because of not taking these types of things seriously versus the business that really did, they're paying 1x. So it really affects exponentially what you're going to pay in the lawsuit.
So then you've got this calcomply.com service that's low-cost training. It sounds like it's kind of an accountability system, where I can kind of hold everybody accountable, my managers and my employees. But it seems like so much of this is framed because of California law as us versus them. And we always got to watch out, us versus them. Are you seeing some employers that are flipping that? And they're saying, hey, this is our policy and we're doing this because we really care about you. And they're using it as a tool. I don't think this would ever be the standard bearer for, hey, let's sing Kumbaya and let's all be one company and be happy. But it almost seems like some of the smarter people would be flipping it and trying to use it as a way to demonstrate we care about you as our employees. It's not, hey, take your meal period, you got to take it. Yep. But hey, take your meal period, I want you to have a break type of thing.
Absolutely. I mean, the best companies, the ones that really do thrive, do have that culture where it's not us versus them. It's we are all in it together. Everybody plays a role. And so the California compliance training that we've been talking about is designed to do that, because it is a way to say, hey, we're educating you, we're equipping you, and we're helping you to understand not only what the policies and the rules are, but why we're doing them. It's important to us. It should be important to you. Here's how we're going to equip you to make sure that you get everything that you're entitled to, and we are living up to our responsibility. Essentially, what an employer and employee relationship is, it's a contract. It's an agreement. We agree to treat each other a certain way. You agree to do certain things for me. I agree to pay you for that. I've got certain rights. I've got certain responsibilities. This training program is a way, hopefully, without a bunch of huge legal costs, for an employer to meet a lot of those obligations, as well as equip their employees.
Yeah, and I think you guys have to come at it from that legal structure type of mindset. I'm more from a company culture leadership position. And so I'm thinking of it's really that employer-employee is a relationship.
Absolutely.
It is a contract. I agree. Legally, it is a contract, and that's your expertise. Yeah. But it's that relational side that I kind of like the CalComply thing, because it's a softer tone versus here's our attorney to teach you on compliance, right, or here's HR to teach you on compliance. I'm ready to go to sleep at the thought of that.
Absolutely. Part of the mission of California Compliance Solutions is to improve the relationship between the employer and the employee. And we believe that our training materials do that because we're bringing this stuff out in the open. We're having an open and honest discussion. We're training completely and fully. We're equipping the managers to have conversations with their employees about these things, so that we take out of the equation this situation where meal periods and rest periods can get missed, or there can be miscommunications about those things, or the way the time clock is used can be somehow misunderstood. We take out those pieces, we improve communication with the employer so that everybody's on the same page and working towards the same result, which is full compliance.
Okay, so we need to wrap this up, but it strikes me, you guys took a chunk out of your revenue to create CalComply. You're saying basically we're not going to do those in-person trainings, and we're going to help you learn this, and we're going to update it regularly without charging you for updates. Have you actually seriously thought, what if 3 years from now, instead of these lawsuits going like this, they leveled off or they dropped because more companies were using CalComply? I'm not aware of another solution out there, so I can't say or another solution. And they actually were avoiding the lawsuits because the plaintiff attorneys looked at all that documentation, and even hopefully it never went to court because, the plaintiff attorneys decided not to, but things just dropped off because people were in better relationship and in better contract, and were communicating instead of assuming, and things were going better. How would you guys feel if your revenue dropped off because of that?
We sometimes joke about it that California Compliance Solutions may put our law firm out of business. And, if that's what happens, that's what happens. I think we have plenty of other things to do in the area of employment law other than wage and hour class actions. I think if we just focus on wage and hour class actions, we really do believe they've become social ills. They are not good for business in California, so they're terrible for employers, but they're also not good for the employees. The only ones who are benefiting from this system, this multi-billion-dollar industry, is these plaintiffs' lawyers. And if we can reduce the number of those lawsuits, if we can bring that number down, if we can ultimately eliminate them, everybody's better. The economy's better, the business is better, the employees are better off. And here's the thing: if we use a tool and solutions like California Compliance Solutions, then what's happening is the employees are getting their meal breaks, they're getting their rest breaks. There's no need for a lawsuit, and it kind of will take the legs out from under the industry.
Yeah. Any closing comments here for our audience?
I would just piggyback on that and say, look, I've been doing this for almost 20 years as well. There's always going to be a need for lawyers, but as business owners and entrepreneurs who really do care deeply about what it takes to start a business, I would love it if our separate company could take off and help prevent some of these lawsuits, help equip owners and employees to have a better relationship, to be more profitable. And I'd also say, look, if the CCS takes off and the law firm kind of goes by the wayside, then we don't have to dress like lawyers. We can be startup guys. We could be like Mark Zuckerberg and wear hoodies all day long. So.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I encourage the audience, check out calcomply.com, learn more. But love what you guys are doing. I love the way you sincerely care about people. And I like this thing where you are entrepreneurs who also happen to be lawyers. So thank you, Alex. Thank you, Brandon, for coming in. I'm sure the audience got a lot out of this.
Thanks for having us, David.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in today. If you like today's episode with Alex and Brandon, let us know. Give us some feedback. Okay, leave us a comment or a rating. And tune in next week. We've got another great show planned.